I never set out to dismantle the pillars of accepted history, nor did I harbor a desire to question centuries of genealogical records maintained by academia. My journey began with mundane curiosity regarding European royal marriages, the Habsburg alliances, the Romanov grandeur, and the Tudor shifts. I sought to understand the political machinations behind the weddings that defined the modern world. However, deep in the archives, I noticed a pattern that was as unsettling as it was undeniable. It was not a clerical error, but a systemic series of voids existing across every major royal house in Europe. The official family trees present an unbroken chain of succession, depicting a world of clear heritage. Yet cross-referencing obscure records with diplomatic correspondence revealed gaps that shouldn't exist. I discovered power transitions that were too clean and swift to be organic. The narrative of European royalty is smoothed over, hiding the cracks beneath. This is where the specter of Tartary, a civilization erased from collective memory, becomes impossible to ignore. It stands as the dark matter of history, invisible, yet exerting a gravitational pull that explains the movements of everything around it. To understand the magnitude of this deception, one must look beyond the kings to the maternal lines of 18th and 19th century royalty. In a patriarchal history, queens are often background figures, yet biologically they are of equal importance. The official narratives cite minor nobility or tiny German principalities that appear and disappear from the map with convenient regularity. We are told these women were the daughters of obscure rulers, yet tracing their ancestry back just 2 generations reveals a trail that goes cold with suspicious speed. In an era obsessed with the divine right of kings and bloodline purity, royal houses viewed genetic heritage as the source of their legitimacy. Marriages were state negotiations planned decades in advance. Given this obsession, why would the great houses of Bourbon or Habsburg accept brides with untraceable origins? Why would a future emperor marry a woman whose grandmother is a ghost in the records? The only logical answer is that this ancestry was deliberately obscured. These women were not nobodies. They were bridges between the old world of Tartary and the new world of the usurpers, their identities erased to fit a new geopolitical narrative. Take the Romanovs. Official Russian history claims a descent from the Rurik dynasty, painting a purely Slavic orientation. But footnotes and suppressed folklore speak of deep ties to Tatar nobility, of alliances predating the westernization of Russia. The narrative claims the Russian Empire conquered the hordes of the East, yet the cultural flow suggests an absorption rather than a conquest. Similarly, the British House of Hanover, imported in 1714, came from German territories that had undergone peculiar dynastic consolidations, aligning perfectly with the disappearance of Tartaria from maps. The sudden elevation of the Hanoverians and the influx of wealth accompanying their rise suggest a coordinated effort to install a new management class over the remnants of a fallen global order. If genealogical anomalies are the smoke, architecture is the fire. Buildings like St. Petersburg's Winter Palace, Buckingham Palace, and the U.S. Capitol are presented as distinct products of national cultures. Yet, stripping away superficial ornamentation reveals identical technical features, proportion systems, and acoustic properties. They utilize the same impossible masonry and soaring rotundas. This neoclassical design is attributed to a Roman revival, but the evidence suggests it was a continuity of a global civilization already present. The architects credited with these masterpieces, Rastrelli, Wren, Nash, often lack the documented capacity to execute projects of such scale in such short time frames with primitive technology. The buildings are witnesses that cannot lie. They speak of a unified, global architectural standard predating the nations claiming them. Maps from the 1600s and 1700s tell a radically different story than modern geography. Cartography from this era depicts Grand Tartary not as a void, but as an enormous sovereign territory, marked with cities and regional boundaries, spanning from the Urals to the Pacific. It is labeled with the prominence of the Roman Empire or China. By the mid-1800s, this label vanishes. The territory is carved up or left as empty silence. Empires usually leave records of collapse, treaties, crises, fragmentation. Yet Tartary vanished without a trace. No great wars of conquest are recorded in the popular imagination. It simply ceased to be. The modern explanation, that Tartary was a vague geographical term, insults the intelligence of Renaissance cartographers who mapped the Americas with astonishing accuracy. It implies a selective incompetence regarding Asia that is harder to believe than the existence of the empire itself. The bloodline question is also genetic. In an age of biological transparency, why has there been no comprehensive public genetic study of European royalty? These families base their standing on ancestry, yet show no interest in scientific verification. A full sequencing might reveal that the European royalty is actually a caste of survivors or usurpers from the very civilization they claim never existed, with markers pointing to the Volga and Altai mountains rather than the Rhine. Architecture remains the most tangible proof. The layout of Schönbrunn Palace, the Winter Palace, and the Forbidden City share fractal geometry and alignment principles that defy coincidence. Many of these structures were discovered or repurposed during the 1700s, precisely when Tartary disappeared from maps. It is statistically impossible for distinct cultures, separated by thousands of miles, to independently develop the exact same advanced construction techniques. Symbolism further connects them. The double-headed eagle appears as the supreme symbol of the Holy Roman Empire, the Russian Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and the Seljuk Turks. Historians struggle to explain this borrowing, but such a powerful symbol represents dominion over East and West. Along with recurring heraldic arrangements of lions and griffins, this suggests a shared symbolic vocabulary predating modern nations. Private royal correspondence even hints at a hidden lingua franca, used by the elite to communicate across borders while subjects remain divided by language. The destruction of evidence completes the puzzle. Between 1650 and 1850, a suspicious number of catastrophic fires destroyed major archives and wooden cities globally: London, Moscow, Washington. These events often occurred right before genealogical verifications or power transitions. Meanwhile, Siberia, labeled as Tartary, became Russian territory without a documented campaign matching the land's scale. Settlers found stone foundations in a region history claims was inhabited only by nomads. The discrepancy between the primitive narrative and the physical ruins suggests a massive cover-up. Viewed together, these anomalies suggest a single ancestral tree branched into supposedly separate lineages. Tartary was likely a world-spanning civilization, a global order whose descendants rule today under new names. They hide their shared heritage because revealing it would admit their authority is built on theft. Rewriting history required a total cultural reset, achieved through the control of education and the laundering effect of endless wars in the 19th century. These conflicts destroyed old infrastructure and killed the generation that remembered the truth. To make a population forget a civilization, you must stigmatize the old identity. Tartary became synonymous with barbarism. This linguistic programming replaced the reality of a high civilization with a narrative of Western supremacy. The architectural consistency implies a technological base inconsistent with the horse and carriage narrative. Theories of atmospheric electricity and acoustic levitation suggest the great cathedrals were functional machines, power plants for a forgotten grid. The denial of Tartary is a dam holding back knowledge that would liberate humanity from scarcity. We must also consider the physical state of cities in the mid-19th century. Early photographs of St. Petersburg, Paris, and San Francisco show massive Greco-Roman architecture, yet the streets are eerily empty and covered in mud, often burying ground floors. This mud flood phenomenon suggests a cataclysmic event occurred shortly before the current world order rose. The founding fathers did not build these cities. They inherited them. They were squatters in the palaces of a vanished race. The discrepancy between their primitive technology and the grandeur of their cities is otherwise inexplicable. The re-education was brutal. Children were taken into state-run facilities like orphan trains and workhouses, severing their connection to oral history. They were taught a new timeline, conditioned to believe their ancestors were savages rather than the builders of star forts. This created a population with collective amnesia. Furthermore, the world fairs of the late 19th century, Chicago, St. Louis, Paris, featured massive ethereal cities, supposedly built of plaster for temporary exhibition. Yet photographs show buildings rivaling the Vatican. It is more likely these were the remaining centers of Tartary, restored for a brief exhibition of looted technology before being destroyed. The burning of these fairs was a ritual. Look at what we can build. Look at what we can destroy, establishing the new regime's dominance over the memory of the old. Theological implications are equally profound. The divine right of kings relies on a God-ordained lineage. If that lineage is a fabrication, the spiritual mandate is void. Tartary was likely a spiritually unified civilization, evidenced by the proximity of mosques, churches, and temples in old prints. Dividing the world into East and West created a dialectic of conflict-fueling power for centuries. Ultimately, this is a question of authority. If ruling elites have erased a continent's history to secure their throne, the social contract is a deception. The legitimacy of every government and academic institution is bankrupt. Trust your eyes over the textbooks, the stone blocks, the Renaissance maps, and the unanswered genetic questions do not lie. These are the cracks in the matrix of history. We must interrogate the past with ruthless skepticism. The truth of a shared, advanced global civilization is waiting to be reclaimed by those brave enough to look.